With today's vote, we have disclosed who we are, a generous, compassionate, bold and joyful people. Yes to inclusion, yes to generosity, yes to love, yes to equal marriage.
You're watching The World from Below, and you just saw a clip of Irish Prime Minister Enda Kenny on the recent same-sex marriage bill that passed in Ireland by referendum. Statistics show that the majority of Australians support same-sex marriage. Still, there's been a lot of campaigning going on. I wanted to ask you, Ali, about what Equal Love does to raise the profile of the same-sex marriage issue, and what methods have you found most effective?
Yeah, well, there's a few different groups within Australia that focus on the issue of marriage equality. There's some of the lobby groups, which we kind of let them do their thing because we think it's really important to mobilise people on the streets. And that plays many different roles. It plays a role in like gaining public support. So I think that we saw when they first changed the Marriage Act in 2004, only a minority of Australians, 42% of Australians supported marriage equality, and now we see it at 72%. And I think having the rallies building up the public profile was really important for that. It meant that having protests on the news all the time also meant that because it was such a big issue, no politician could get interviewed in the lead up to an election without being asked the question of marriage equality. And the pressure on the politicians that the protests have, I think is really important. And I think it also plays a role with many people that attend the rallies, giving people a sense that they're a part of the change is really, really important. I think if you look through the 60s and 70s, through the civil rights movements, how much that means to people that they were a part of fighting for change through the civil rights movements. And it gives a real sense that if this passes, and then it gets taken back, we're going to keep fighting. Like, you want to have a movement there that can be on the ball and be able to put that pressure back on the government at any point and continue, as you said earlier, to continue to fight for other rights that we still don't have.
Amy, I also really wanted to ask before we have to leave, Archer's just launched issue 4, which is incredible. There was there was an article and some photos on the front cover. There was a photo of an older couple embracing, and to me it just really raised a good point about how we sort of deprive some people of a sexuality in our culture, and it got a lot of attention in the media. Would you mind talking about that, please?
Yeah, we decided to do a series on ageing and sexuality for our 4th issue, and I was surprised with how much it ruffled feathers, actually. It's hard to predict sometimes what's going to cause a stir in the mainstream media, but I guess there is a habit in the mainstream of this infantilization of older people and robbing them of an opportunity to discuss issues like sexuality. And this is, it's a huge problem. And the fact that the mainstream media jumped on this issue just shows that it's still really important to talk about. So we do try and shine a spotlight on people from marginalised communities and people whose voices are lesser heard in the media on issues around sex and gender. And unfortunately the ageing population still fits that criteria. So we asked a number of people over 50, 60 and 70 their attitudes on sex and sexuality. And we ran a story by an older transgender woman about how her journey's played out. And it's just, it's been lovely to shine a light on those voices.
So I wanted to ask you both of your work involves the media in some capacity, and I just wanted to know, there's a lot of stuff recently like, what's their name? Carleen Jenner, all these different personalities, or Laverne Cox, having different people who are of a diverse sexuality and have a really interesting story, having them be glorified in the media. Do you feel like this is helpful to normalising and bringing people out of the shadows who have been marginalised by our heterosexist culture? Do you feel like this has been positive, and do you feel like the message always gets across about in the right way?
I think, yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act, depending on the media outlet. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. But definitely the visibility of genderqueer individuals is a positive thing for the mental health of people with diverse gender identities all across the world. Would you agree, Ali?
Yeah, I totally agree. I know that it's been a controversial issue, all the Caitlyn Jenner coverage, and people that feel like they're from a different class. Not everybody has the privilege of being able to afford to have, gender reassignment surgery or whatever, or the type of makeup that she buys. But I think that having somebody put in the spotlight so positively is like super positive. I think that it shows people that they are that it's perfectly fine to be like that. And I think the problem is that everybody should have the opportunity to be the way they want to be and be seen as the way they want to be. And unfortunately, we live in a class society, and we, it should be more the other way around. Like, people should be able to have access to whatever they want to be able to be who they are.
But still, the issue does bring those discussions to the foreground, which is a really good thing.
I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but I'd like to thank our guests, Amy Middleton and Ali Hogg. I would also like to thank all our crew and producers and our hosts, RMI TV. You have been watching The World from Below.